Okay.
Okay, welcome to our filmmaker Q&As. Again, I'm Katie. I'm a producer at Femme. I'm acting as a sort of go-between and someone you can direct questions to. This Q&A will last 30 minutes. Audience members, you can put your questions in the question box in the top right corner, and we'll address those towards the end. This will be recorded, and you can view the recording in our watch panel group. That should be visible to you on the left-hand side.
Do you want to sit with me?
And yeah. Okay, yes, and that's it. Audience members, you can also DM me with questions. And I'd love to introduce our host, Maria Judice. Maria is a visual storyteller working in cinema, writing, photography, and public art. And she's going to be moderating the chat, and she will introduce herself more a little bit and also the filmmakers. All right, over to you, Maria.
Hello. Welcome everyone to this amazing program we've had at Cinema Film tonight. I am calling in from San Francisco, home of the Ohlone Nation. Also, I would love to just start off with just introducing everybody and hearing which film that you either directed or worked on today. Anybody can.
I'm Dana.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Dana. I'm the writer and director of Aurora.
I'm Kripa. I'm the producer of Aurora.
I'm Ray. I'm the writer-director of Emergence.
I'm Mafer. I'm the director of The Color of Genius.
And I think we have you left, Allison. Can you introduce yourself? You're on mute.
Thank you. Sorry, I answered and I didn't realize I was muted. I'm sorry about that. I'm Allison Torum. I'm the writer-director of Essentials. Did you hear me?
Yes, we did.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great to meet everyone. So I'm going to start off with a question. I'm sure the audience is about to throw down a bunch of questions on us. But my question is, everyone had such, personal, very intimate work that they presented in this shorts program. And can you guys just talk a little bit about, like, as a director, how you approach something like that? Like, what was your how did you create a set that was able to hold work like that? And what were the things that you were worried about? And what were the things that really you're proud of and really showcasing some really intimate, personal work? Sorry, my camera got turned off for some reason. Can we start with Aurora, since that was one of the first films we saw tonight?
Yeah, so Aurora was a personal story that was based off of an experience I had after college in New York. So I knew I wanted to, for my thesis, this is a Chapman thesis, to make more of a personal story. And I felt, and it really comes down to the idea of bisexuality and finding one's voice through finding one's sexuality as well. I feel that the world is always making us choose to be just default heterosexual. And then if we choose to be that we have an interest in the same gender, it will make us, it will kind of switch us to orient us to be just having relationships with that gender, but to have relationships with both genders is something that I wanted to explore. So basically, I wanted to explore the idea of bisexuality through music. And so we decided to shoot it in New York. We shot interiors in New York and exteriors in LA. So a lot of the shoot was planning our shoot in New York, which was a big thing. We had to go through a distance proposal with the professors and get it approved. So it turned out to be a big shoot, but overall, is a way for me personally to process some of my emotions around my experience that's based on as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. What about The Color of Genius?
Hi. So, well, since this was a documentary, it really was not my story. It was Diana's story, and she is in the audience, I believe. And what I could say in terms of the personal approach to this is that I really wanted to ensure that the film showed the way she sees the world. Diana is an acquired savant, which you probably already learned what that was through the film. And so, and these are people who, due to either some brain condition or like a traumatic brain injury, etc., developed skills that they never had before, and there's only like 100 people in the world that currently have this syndrome. And so she's experienced the world through these like visions that she gets, and she also has double vision, hence all the prism effects and kaleidoscopes that were used. And so I really wanted it to show that personal view of the way Diana sees the world. So I wouldn't say it's personal to me because, of course, I met it and I put my vision, but I really wanted just to tailor it so that it was the most accurate vision of how Diana sees the world and her story. Because that's, I think, the best way to approach documentaries.
Awesome. Thank you so much. What about Emergence?
Yeah. So for Emergence, I think it came from a couple of places where, first of all, I was this was made in my senior year of college. So it was during the pandemic. But before that, I was a trans athlete where I played ultimate frisbee. And so that I drew from that experience. But mostly the story I think I wanted to tell came from a place of thinking about where a lot of the narratives you see traditionally are of trans women like coming into their own or figuring their own identities out. And I guess I was also a little bit, honestly, a little tired of just seeing that narrative and kind of curious about what comes after, like what does normal life look like? And so through that exploration, like a lot of these interactions are things that I think cis queer women and trans queer women kind of interact, like the Disney princesses. Like it's a very unique and specific type of way that like we perform femininity in a very different way. And yeah, I think I'm very proud of the fact that I was able to work with such great collaborators. I mean, the music was by Slate Warnken, who is just a fantastic trans musician based in New Orleans. And yeah, just a wonderful cast and crew. And it was just a great experience.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And what about Essentials?
So a lot of what it was based primarily in the feeling of being cut off from like regular familial and social interaction, and then I got really curious about what that could how that could be experienced differently by different people based on their existing lives. Like everyone went into the period of lockdown with a different set of tools, a different set of relationships, a different set of just general life circumstances, skills, everything. And so it's interested in like how something universal could be experienced very differently by two different people, but at the same time, how those feelings can overlap, at least for a moment, and how they can allow two people to get closer to themselves in a way that maybe in their more ordinary relationships just get swept under the rug as just something normal. And so like to the freedom of being around a stranger. So that's definitely a theme I've like thought about before. But with this project, it became something that I like actively became kind of obsessed with and wanting to explore. And I was also on like the personal level. I mean, there's like spazzy female characters in a lot of things, and then there's like wise sage men and like older men, and I was very curious about like what if these two characters who are depicted in whether they're protagonists or not, they can be potentially flat. What if they get to meet each other and like become more whole in themselves as characters, but also for audiences and interaction. So yeah, there was a lot of things that went into the sort of thinking part of the process, but those are things I was really excited to explore for sure.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I'm going to go to a question from the audience right now. Howard Immer asks, to all the artists, how much did the films come to your heart versus being a product of numerous revisions and exploring what you really wanted to say? Anybody can jump in if you want. Go ahead, Allison.
I actually have a hi Howie, thank you so much for coming. I have a specific answer to this exact kind of question, actually, of all things. The piece was written from a place of being in the pandemic, and a peer who's a wonderful person, very supportive of my career, told me that that I shouldn't make it about the pandemic and that I should transpose the themes onto something that would not have any kind of timestamp. And that kind of spun me out a little. I was like, oh my God. So I like did like a few drafts that covered isolation, covered intersectional or intergenerational connection and performance of gender and like all this stuff I was playing with. And I was like, these are fine. But I didn't care about the story. I was like, this, I could make this at any time and I don't care. And that was a really big moment for me of kind of like a detour that then in retrospect felt really necessary because it allowed me to reconnect with my original premise and just feel like, hey, if someone brings that up and they're like, oh, why did you do that? I'm like, I totally respect where you're coming from. It's just, this is a story I had to tell. And so like, it was definitely a process of revising and refining the dialogue and making it not too long, not too short, everything. But at the heart of it, like I did need to stick to what I care, the story that I cared about telling. And so that's a great question.
Yes, please, Ray. Please go ahead.
That's so interesting because I felt like I had the opposite experience and that like I felt like the story came to me through the revisions. Also, Allison, that story broke my heart. Your short film was so good.
Thank you so much.
Anyways, sorry. Yeah, I think through the revisions, like a lot of the stuff that like the original draft was, I remember Tori and Amanda, they were like there was that similar push and pull, but a lot of it was different. Like, for example, the party scene was a full-blown party scene, but then like obviously because of the pandemic, we weren't able to do that, so we had to revise. But I think it ended up being more interesting of them being late and having this like weird haunted, like abandoned party kind of thing. Yeah, and then like we were able to lean into that weird kind of flavor of like it being kind of ominous almost, or like very like intimate at a certain point too, where they were like the only people in the world. Yeah, and so that wouldn't have come without a revision. So it was definitely like we discovered a lot of the film along the way.
Yeah, Dana, please.
Yeah, so this was made in a grad school environment, so there were a lot of different opportunities to workshop the film. We had an advisor, and then there was a class environment, and then there was a feedback of the producer's class, of Kripa's class and stuff. So it was a really big exercise in learning to reflect on what I actually wanted versus what other people wanted from the film. And another big challenge was one professor who looked at it was more leaning toward like naturalist, formalist types of filmmaking, and one was more leaning towards like realist filmmaking. So, and she was more of a commercial director. So it was really a learning experience for me. I think I still have a long way to go with being able to really like separate other people's opinions from what I wanted. But I knew from all the revisions And the feedback, the things that remained consistent and the things that were consistent for me was that it was going to be shot in New York. We did get a lot of pushback on that as well. And that I wanted to have music. I want to be about two women. I want to touch on bisexuality and bisexual themes. So those remain consistent.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, and I would love to add to that.
Mhm.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
She was at the helm of all of that. But sort of trying to be the wind beneath her wings on the side, what I was observing is that there was a lot of her authenticity that seemed to be watered down. And I think as a producer, and generally as producers, that's something we need to try and protect. So that was a good learning experience to see how to do that. We are now having looked at Aurora and seen how it turned out, and then after that, doing tremendous amount of research on bisexuality in general and how it's reflected in the commercial space. What we've realized is the authenticity of bisexuality is actually heavily watered down. Most people, either use the term bisexuality in a very tropish way, or they don't use it at all, which is very strange, and it's very it kind of excludes the bisexual community almost entirely from any kind of support that they could have. So this experience and the fact that we were part of that authenticity being watered down has kind of emboldened us to try and take this further and make a feature out of it, and do multiple parts and multiple stories that features authentic bisexual stories. Yeah, so on one hand, do it in a bolder way in the future. So
Awesome. And I'm going to go to another audience question. So I'm going to start with, please excuse me for messing up your name, Mafer. Start with you. What was your biggest challenge takeaway with your short?
Well, I think the biggest challenge was that while it was being made, I was also going through the educational experience of how to make a documentary. So there were a lot of things that I had to figure out while making the film. It was my sophomore film in college. I'm now a third year student. And so I didn't know how to color grade or use most of the editing softwares. So it was basically most of it an experiment. So I think it's really, as an artist, has been the most ambitious project I have undertaken. And most of it is because I didn't know how to do many of the things. For documentaries, you have to also write a paper cut. It was the first time that I wrote a paper cut too. So it was definitely the educational experience while also doing something that was very important because there was, a real person out there that was going to use the film, right? In this case, Diana. And I felt obviously a lot of pressure to honor her story. So that was definitely the difficult part. But it came out pretty well, I think.
It came out very well. Anybody else have any takeaways or challenges when making your short? Allison, do you have anything?
I think when you're you choose to write something and then direct it and then act in it and then produce it, it's a lot of different hats to wear. So I think the takeaway there is, like, it was really cool to be able to form relationships with my producing team and my DP that allowed me to be in the moment on screen. And I do feel like we pulled it off. Like, I don't when my editor and I were looking at the footage and everything, and I was reflecting on the process, like I didn't feel like we didn't allow that to happen. It was just very difficult. It is very difficult to wear those hats. So basically, like just assigning as much as you can up like at that last turning point before you get on set, so that when you're acting you can act, and when you're giving notes you can give notes, and like, you know, take the time to build those relationships with cast. I mean, in our case it was just me and Austin, and that was very easy in that regard. But yeah, it's a lot of hats to wear. So I guess the takeaway is just like, next time I take something like that on, I'll know more what I'm getting into, and I'll, you know, I'll just know more about how to make that like easier on myself, I think. So yeah.
Awesome. Anybody else
Yeah.
have any good takeaways or challenges from being a newer director, from being a woman, from hitting subject matters that are kind of difficult and challenging, and how you have even engaged audiences around your projects? Ray and Dana, anything there?
I found that there's less of a mainstream or less of a interest in films with this kind of content. I feel like that's what I've discovered is films with bisexual content, or it didn't resonate as much with certain audiences. So just seeing which audiences it resonated with was a big takeaway. Like I think it definitely resonated with the LGBTQ community, but some other people they just didn't resonate with it. So I just felt it was interesting to see how it almost polarized people in some ways. That was a really interesting takeaway that I wasn't expecting.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I hope somebody's going to keep up time for me to make sure. Okay.
We have one more question from Faith for the makers of Aurora.
Awesome. Okay, so this question is about the music for Aurora. From Faith, I especially loved your cinematography and your music. How did you find the lyrics in the writing process? Did the script or the songs come first?
Well, thank you. I feel like a lot of the music was just separate music. We took music from separate artists who we resonated with, so they weren't necessarily linked directly to the film. And but we did resonate with the songs and the music and the artists. So we took those. There were a few, like the song that Aurora's singing at the bar. It's about New York City, so that came after the script, and that was based off of the fact that they were in New York and based on the plot. But I would say a lot of like the one she's singing with Travis, the producer, I actually composed that like almost like 10 years ago. And I brought it in because I wanted to use that song. So I would say a lot of them came before or separately from the script. Griffith, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and the cinematography, because she's focusing on the music aspect, but there's obviously multiple aspects to her artistry, and the cinematography, she wanted to make sure that while the emotions and the dialogue of the actors were downplayed a lot because they weren't very overt and they were not meant to be very overt characters, very expressive of their emotions. Um, the camera movements were supposed to make up for that. So you see these big, bold movements in the cinematography and the style of filming lent to the uniqueness of that, of the visual style.
I think the colors also lent to that. I feel like we wanted to go for colors that were brighter, more muted, but also like bright in a sense too. So colors that definitely stuck out is something that and stuck out at the same time as having like softer lighting to highlight them in a certain way is what we're going for.
And what really helped was the natural environment. from the producer's perspective, I would say it was actually really not expensive at all to film in some of the big touristy areas in New York, which are featured in the film. It just lends a lot of premium, but honestly, super cheap to do. So if anyone wants to go out there and make big moves and shoot in big touristy places that have these incredible visual appeal, don't stop yourself. You'll be surprised at how cheap you can do that, even if you don't have all the resources that you want. Go for it.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Thank you to all the filmmakers. It was such a pleasure to host tonight's Q&A, and congrats to Rebecca and Katie for the kickoff of the festival. I'm going to hand it over.
And Maria, I just wanted to say thank you. And also, well, I just want to say thank you, everyone who's here. It really means the world to see the 4th edition of the Cinema Femme Festival and all of these amazing faces and beautiful films. And I mean, it's just nice. You know, we're on a virtual beach, but whatever. I still feel like totally close with all you guys. And I love the spirit of this festival, and I'm just so excited to see how the next 4 days go. And so thank you for coming, and I hope to see you at upcoming events. So
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Bye.